I've been going to the gym 30 years. I've been pounding all these heavy weights, and I said, I look nothing like these people you're training in here. He goes, what's the difference? He looked at me just like, oh, you want to go down that path? And I had no idea I had no idea what he was talking about. He goes, let me just tell you something. They're in the bodybuilding world, and people in the bodybuilding world understand one thing. It's 80% diet, 20% the workouts. And as hard as these workouts are, and hard as you see these guys working in here, and as hard as you're working in here, the diet's 10 times harder. He said, take off your shirt. And so took off my shirt, and he looks at me and he goes, yeah, you have some potential to get there. And I said, well, how come I don't look anything like all these people with all the workout I'm doing? And, and he said, you have plenty muscle mass. It's all laying underneath all that fat you got. Right. And so I'm like, okay. And, he goes, if you wanted to make an attempt at doing this, let me just tell you how it's going to be. And I said, go ahead. And he said, of all the people that set out to do this, less than 10% actually make it up on the stage.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Run With The Cheetahs podcast. This podcast is the companion podcast to the book, Run With The Cheetahs, Your Climb to an Extraordinary Life, written by Jerry Freishtat. And we've got the author with us today. Jerry, I want you to pop in here real quick and say hello. How are you?
Hey, everything's great over here in Cheetah Land. Looking forward to another great day.
Yeah, we had a good one last time. I'll tell you, that was good stuff.
Yep.
Well, listen, first off, if this is your first time here, let me thank you for tuning in, checking us out. I hope you give it a good listen and let us know what you think. If you're coming back for more, God bless you. We really appreciate your listening to us and checking us out. And we hope that we're doing you some good. I mean, the purpose of this podcast is to really help you restart or reset and get going towards that life you dream of. That's what we're all about here. So today's episode is titled Embrace the Battle. And I'm going to go ahead and jumpstart this episode right now and tell you that I think it was last year. Jerry, was your audiobook, is that when we did that in 2024?
Yeah, it was in the fall of 24, yeah.
Okay, so Jerry had written his book, and then a short time after that, he felt the need, and he was getting requests for an audiobook version. So he recorded the audiobook. But when he recorded the audiobook, he asked me to collaborate with him on some bonus content that would run in between the chapters. And we did that. We had a great time doing it. That's kind of where the seeds for the podcast were actually initially seen or initially sown. But in any event, when we got to this chapter, and I had read the book a couple of times by this time, but when we got to the chapter, Embrace the Battle, I'm just going to tell you, this is probably my favorite chapter in the book. And I embraced Embrace the Battle as my new mantra and mindset. And finished up that audiobook. I was on full charge. And, I decided I was going to use that. I was going to start a few new battles or restart a couple of my own personal battles. Took a couple of false starts to get me going, but I eventually got it going. And I just want to tell you, Jerry, and I want to tell everybody that's listening, what's going on in my life right now. My morning quiet time, I'm winning. My morning workouts, I'm winning. My diet and lifestyle, cleaner eating, I am winning. I'm in a fantastic place right now in my life, and I want to give the proper credit to you, your book, your words, and my new self-talk, Embrace the Battle. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I want to encourage our listeners, anyone who's listening, I hope you will take this to heart. Let it be your new mantra. Don't wait for New Year's to do a restart or a reset on your goals. You can start today. I hope we're going to give you some material today that'll really help kickstart that. Thank you, Jerry, for everything you've done.
Absolutely, Russell. And coming from you, that's pretty special. I got to I got to say, we've all heard those common phrases of, pay it forward, giving back, and so forth. And, as I've gotten older, I do believe that the greatest gift in life is to be able to teach what you learn. And then hopefully those results have some type of positive impact on the people you touch. So, to hear that you've had success and you've had, fought some battles and you've won some battles and it's elevated your life, in various areas is it's just it's a very special thing, and that's what it's all about.
Fantastic. So, Jerry, let me ask you, what does embrace the battle mean to you?
Well, embracing the battle, essentially, it's the training and callousing of your mind to prepare you to face all of life's adversities. You must be prepared to endure through, the toughest competition, difficult circumstances, and you got to be able to do that regardless of the conditions that are put in front of you. One thing I'd like to point out right here at the start is your toughest competitor in life is going to be yourself.
Mm. Yep, we spend a lot of time talking about that.
Yeah, yes, we
It's
do.
a tough one. It's a
Yep.
tough one. It's tough to accept. It's tough to work on, but I know you're right. Well, in your book, you start out this chapter with a quote by one of everybody's favorite heroes, Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone playing Rocky Balboa. And I'm going to pull up a quote. I'm going to read you. This is just an abbreviated version of the law because it's a pretty long quote. I'm going to read you an abbreviated version of it, and then I want you to comment on it. Rocky says to his son, he's actually talking to his son. Is that correct in this?
That yeah, it's
Yeah.
his. Yep.
The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much can you take and keep moving forward? That's how winning is done. Sylvester Stallone is Rocky Balboa. Is that the bottom line?
That is the bottom line. And when I talk about this, one thing I'll say is from a fictional movie, there's never been more factual truth than that statement.
Wow.
I call it, spewing the truth kind of right in your face. Life's going to hit you harder than anything else, and, it's all about being prepared for it. And like he says in that quote, it's not how hard you get hit because you will get hit. It's how hard you can get hit and get back up and keep moving forward. And, in the game of life, you're going to get hit, whether it's self inflicted or whether it's thrust upon you. I mean, it's coming. So, you getting up, moving forward, is the essence of embracing the battle,
So let's not overcomplicate this.
right?
The reason most people do not achieve their goals is because they quit.
Simple.
They
Yep.
quit. Yeah, they quit. There's a lot of reasons they quit. Maybe it's too tough. Maybe it's the lies they've told themselves. But that's it. They quit. That is the entire mystery. There's no dramatic plot twist. There's no complicated psychology degree needed to understand that. You had a goal. Something gets in your way. Some adversity, some challenge, and you stopped. Now I know that's not the sexy, inspiring truth that we want to hear, but it is the truth. You make the case that indeed ourselves are our biggest adversary. Break that down for us.
The reason we're our biggest adversary is, if you read most self-help books and, you listen to most, podcasts or anything else, everybody's telling you what to do. But the reality in life is the toughest battles fought sometimes are what's not to do. And most people don't ever think about that. But, your detrimental behaviors that you do on a daily basis, can, create a very difficult pattern in your life of of reinforcement of negative thoughts and processes that go down a very bad path. And what creates that's the part of us that loves comfort and ease. It's what we call the sheep within, that inner voice that says, hey, it's all good enough, and it keeps us existing, instead of truly living.
So the biggest fight is getting past ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, the climb requires silencing that voice and choosing the cheetah mindset, focus, speed, and discipline. And the way you do that is, and we've discussed this before also, is, with daily micro wins. Everybody should write this down. Confidence is simply the memory of winning. And if you create those daily micro wins, the confidence will just slowly go up that ladder. And that's what, will give you the inner wherewithal to, have the discipline to win, some of these hard fought battles.
I absolutely agree with every bit of that. And as a matter of fact, in business, one of the things I've always tried to do with my teams is to create momentum and forward momentum. And the momentum I often try and create by creating little successful wins during each day, whether it's for a teammate, whether it's for a project, but creating little wins and you just get that forward momentum going. I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
So listen, here's some tough talk. You're big on tough talk, buddy. I got to tell you, you bring it hard.
I was,
You write
I
that,
was going to say, the truth speaks. I mean, it's the bottom line in life. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but that's the reality.
Jerry. You write that average is a sin and comfort is a curse. That's pretty strong language there, my man.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the answer to that is, pain. I mean, the reason that, people want to stay average and they want to stay in that comfort zone is they're trying to avoid pain. I'm going to give you a simple, quick story that had a huge impact on me. Going back many years ago, but I was about 40 years old. I was in the middle of a very, very difficult divorce. And my therapist, in the middle of a conversation one day, kind of with an angry tone, he kind of looked at me and he goes, "You know what, Jerry? You need to grow up." And I'm telling you, when you're 40 years old and you have some, therapist guy, sitting across from you who makes a statement like that, I mean, I was really pissed. I mean, it was like, who the hell are you to be telling me, I need to grow up? And, but what happens when you hear the truth, if it creates anger, a lot of times that's the hardcore truth coming out, and you can feel it. And at the moment, of course, I wasn't receptive to hearing that or anything else, but years later, man, I can tell you, boy, was he right. I mean, I during that period of time of victimization, I was acting like a little kid, like a child, and I did need to grow up, take charge, and move on. And it was really difficult. But as I said, sometimes anger at truth, means you're close to the real change. If hearing the truth makes you angry, you probably are one step closer to making some quantum leaps.
So if the truth pisses you off, don't run, lean into it.
That's exactly right.
Wow. Well, I got something in an email just yesterday. I get the newsletter of Mark Manson. And by the way, he has a fabulous podcast for anybody that wants to listen to it. It's tremendous. But he sent something out yesterday, and this is pretty amazing. He says, to deny pain is to deny our own potential growth. That's
Yeah,
exactly what we're
yeah. I mean,
that's what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. I mean, it's by reframing it. Pain is the price of growth. Okay, it's not a penalty. Another another guy you might see on social media. This guy Dan Penna, a little crude around the edges. This guy, but one of my favorite lines that he says is, "True self-esteem has to be learned with scar tissue." And every scar tissue carries a lesson. Once you embrace that, you stop fearing it, and in fact, you eventually look forward to the next battles that you have to face in the wounds that you're going to have to heal.
Love it. What was his name again?
Dan Penna, Pena.
Okay. Well, there was one more line from Mark Manson. I'll read this too. You don't build resilience by feeling good all the time. You build you build resilience by getting better at feeling bad. That sounds like you, Jerry. I mean, that sounds like that's the medicine you're preaching all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we all know what we have now. right? You know what you got. Is that what you want? And when you ask that question, by the way, don't say, is it what I want now? Is it what I want for the rest of my life? Because until you're willing to embrace change and face those battles that you have to do to elevate yourself to the next level, nothing is going to change. In order to change, input needs to change. And that requires risk, fear, challenges, controversy, and you are definitely going to incur plenty failures. If you go out and seek adversity, confront it straight on, you will see what happens, and eventually good things start to transition out of going out there and challenging yourself.
Absolutely. So, Jerry, when we talk about life's trials, adversities, and setbacks, we really need to stop looking at those things as bad things. It turns out those are the very things that are the segues to the goals that we're trying to achieve. So, adversity is actually our friend, and it's the path to the life we desire. Agreed?
100%.
Okay. Well, Jerry, I tell you what, the crown jewel of this chapter, I still remember reading this for the first time. And so, people, if you don't have this book, get the book and you're going to love this chapter. But, Jerry, the crown jewel of this chapter is you telling your story of getting into deciding in your 50s that you wanted to get into bodybuilding. And, I've got to ask you, please share that story with our listeners.
Okay, I'll have to give you the abbreviated version here, so due to time. But
Yep.
the before I start the story, that what people need to understand is wasn't something I necessarily decided in my 50s. This was a 30-year project, and it all began. I played golf. Played collegiate golf, Division I at University of Maryland, and my golf career ended with a couple back surgeries. And when I had those back surgeries, I kind of got in a really bad place. Not only physically, I got in a bad place mentally. I kind of went down the party path, and I was drinking and out half the night and so forth and everything else. And but something, I've always been a competitor, and I always, enjoyed everything athletic. But playing golf was, kind of the opposite of, being a weightlifter. Like, matter of fact, back in those days, we were taught never to touch a weight. So there was a gym, this little hole in the wall. I mean, literally rusty equipment, old beat up place called Dynamo. Had a little combination on the door to get in. And so I joined there, and I just started going in. And all of a sudden I started noticing, that there were some really serious dudes in this place. I mean, big time bodybuilders and power lifters. And, it got to the point where I said, you know what, I kind of like what I see here. And, let me give this thing a run. So just to give you a little base where all this started, I'm not a really big guy. And back then I was, 22, 23 years old. And, I weighed about 150 pounds. So I'm going in this gym, as you can imagine, with all these monster guys. They're all in their benching 300, 350, whatever. And there I am with my 150-pound bench. But the thing is that, when you get around the right people and you show up, good things start to happen. So, I developed a few relationships with a couple of the, real experienced, power lifters and bodybuilders in there, and they were more than willing to help out. Next thing I got my, bench up to 185, then 200 and so forth. And so years went by, and I decided, I'm going to set a goal to bench 300 pounds. And 300 is kind of the gold standard, for anybody, who's a serious weightlifter. And that goal came and went multiple times over the years. And I would get to like 290. I remember I actually got up 295 one time, could not get 300. Again, walked away from it 6 months, came back a year later, whatever. It took 10 years. And one day I walked into this new gym that I was going to and just had a discussion with one of the trainers there about, that I've been trying to bench 300 pounds and I've been working at it a hell of a long time. And he goes, "Well, tomorrow I'm going to give you a workout to do. We're going to knock this out in a couple months." I said, "Well, bring it on, right?" So I start working out with this guy, and these were intense workouts. I mean, to the point of, I actually threw up a couple times, and I was like, you know, I'd never experienced pushing myself, to that level. Well, after it wasn't that long, about a month after working out with him, I said his name was David. I said, "David, I've been going to the gym 30 years. I've been pounding all these heavy weights, and I said, I look nothing like these people you're training in here." He goes, "What's the difference?" And he looked at me like just like directly right in my eye, and he goes, "Oh, you want to go down that path?" And I had no idea what he was. I had no idea what he was talking about. And he goes, "Let me just tell you something. They're in the bodybuilding world, and people in the bodybuilding world understand one thing. It's 80% diet, 20% the workouts. And as hard as these workouts are, and hard as you see these guys working in here, and as hard as you're working in here, the diet's 10 times harder." And I said, "Okay." So, I kind of left it at that, just got a little information. And then, it was like another couple weeks later, I said, the whole gym was lined with these pictures on the wall of people that had competed in, shows, mostly local shows, even though there were some professionals that trained there as well. But it was mostly local shows. But there were, probably 80, 90 pictures on the wall. And so I said, what's up with all the pictures on the wall?" He goes, "Anybody that I train that actually gets on the stage gets their picture on the wall." And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" And he literally, he said, "Take off your shirt." And so took off my shirt, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Yeah, you have some potential to get there." And I said, "Well, how come I don't look anything like all these people, all the workout I'm doing?" And he said, "It's you have plenty muscle mass. It's all laying underneath all that fat you got." Right.
Oh,
And
God.
so I'm like, okay. And he goes, "If you wanted to make an attempt at doing this, let me just tell you how it's going to be." And I said, "Go ahead." And he said, "Of all the people that set out to do this, less than 10% actually make it up on the stage." And I'm sitting there like, "Why is that?" And he goes, "This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done." And I'm like, "Okay, David, I've done a lot of hard shit. I've had pretty, pretty rough time at a few things in my life. But as is always the case since I'm a kid, when someone tells me it's going to be hard, you can't do it, blah, 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 it just motivated me. I said, let's look into this. And he goes, "Before we do any of that," he goes, you have to see if you have the discipline to manage the diet program." So he gave me just a 8-week diet of what a bodybuilder would do, and put me on that thing. And he said, "The test is this: you are not going to eat one bite of anything that's not on this list. You're going to eat every calorie when I tell you to eat it, how I tell you to eat it. You're not substituting foods. You're not changing one single thing." He goes, "If you can do that for 8 weeks straight, I'll consider training you to do a show." And so I, again, just like everything else in life, okay, sure, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. Well, let me tell you something. It wasn't to and this is why people quit, by the way. I didn't get to the third day, and I was like really suffering. I mean, I was withdrawing, I guess, from 30 years of eating bad, whatever. And you 2, 3 weeks into it, your brain starts getting starved for carbs and fats, and you get this desperate feeling. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. But I did it. I did this 8 weeks, and in that 8 weeks, by the way, I lost. I think it was like 8 or 9 pounds, in 8 weeks. Looked a whole lot better. And so at the end of that time, he said, "Okay, let's set up a time to do a consult about what a show's all about." And so I come in for the consult. And he said, "Okay, you passed the test. You got through the 8 weeks." And by the way, he kind of winked at me. He goes, "So you say." Because he assumes everybody cheats, right? Which,
Yes,
by,
yes.
which I found out later. One thing that everybody should know is I found out later that of all these people, these bodybuilders, everything see, and everybody else, I mean, the people that actually do an entire prep without cheating at all is like 1%. It's almost impossible, right?
And I'm guessing you
And
were in that 1%, by the way.
for the 8 weeks,
Yes,
for those
yes.
8 weeks, right? Okay, so but I did pull it off, and it gave me the confidence that I could potentially do it. But we sit down, and he lays out what the plan is, how it works, and then he tells me, as bad as that 8 weeks was, he goes, the actual prep is 10 times worse than that. He said, you are going to be in a feeling of desperation, pain, and suffering like you've never felt before. And he goes, "Hey, are you sure you want to do this, Jerry?" And I said, "Yeah, bring it on. Let's go." And so, again, like anything, and here's another thing everybody should know, whenever you go into anything that you haven't done before, you're going not only are you likely to be bad at it initially, there are unknowns that you
Sure.
cannot anticipate. Right. So one of the things he said to me at the prep meeting was he started talking about the cardio and how much the cardio was required. And for whatever reason, I just kind of blew it off. Like I didn't really think it was a big deal or anything. I'm thinking, yeah, I'll do some cardio, whatever. And it never crossed my mind that I'm not a cardio guy. I had never run a mile, literally in my life. Never run a mile in my life. And when I played sports as a kid, I was the kid that was the last guy, walking at the end, and around the track, whatever it would be. And so we start the prep process. In the prep process, it was a 6 day a week weight training workout. It was 5 days a week initially, cardio. And when he gave me the cardio workout, I said, "David," I said, "Well, I'm not a cardio guy." I said, I can't do 30 minutes of cardio on the step mill." The step mill is that machine. It's like a stepper rotating steps, and everybody in the bodybuilding world uses that because it's the most efficient for calories and no impact on your body. And he goes, "Jerry, just quit now." And little did I know that was going to be a phrase I heard multiple times. Just quit now. And actually, it was effing quit now. That was,
Right.
it. David was not. He was as far from polite as I could describe in reference to him getting results in his coaching. So I said, again, I'm saying, okay, I'll try it. And so he came back to me and he said, "Here's what we're going to do." He goes, "We're going to start this out. You're just going to do literally 5 minutes a day. And then we're going to do 10. And then we're going to do 20." And sure enough, I get on the step mill, and, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not a cardio guy. I mean, after 10 minutes on that step mill, I was ready to like pass out. It was unbelievable. And in my mind, I'm thinking that, I don't know if I can do this. I might, should I quit? Should I just give this up? It crossed my mind multiple times because I had convinced myself for 30 years that I couldn't do cardio. And the next thing is, he ups me to 20 minutes. I'm suffering. I mean, I'm like dying on that thing. And after, I guess it was like the 7th or 8th week in the prep, you got to remember, at this point, I've lost probably 10 pounds. And I'm on the step mill one day, and I got to my 30 minutes, and all of a sudden, I like felt good. I'd
Wow.
never experienced that in my life, and I stayed on for an extra 5 minutes. And that was a huge moment for me. And as prep moved on, the cardio became the whole obsession, I guess, to what the end result was going to be. When you're not, I'm not a genetically very big person, so conditioning was key critical for me to do well in any show. Any which way, that lie that I've been told myself for 30 years was just not true. I had never worked at it long enough, hard enough, to get to where a point where everything was going to work out properly. So the next thing that happened was I'm going to say it was about 10 weeks, 11 weeks, something like that. um, I was at home, and at this point, I'm suffering really pretty bad. You get irritable. You don't want to be around anybody. Your entire social life is non-existent. You can't go out. You can't eat it. You can't do anything. And everywhere you go, you got to bring your meals with you. And I wake up one day, and I'm in the bathroom, and I go to get the shower, and I just looked at myself in the mirror, and I went like, "Holy shit, is that me?" I mean, I it was literally like somebody else I was looking at, right?
Wow.
And it was just one of those moments of where you realize that something amazing is going on here, right? And that moment also, the better you looked, as the prep process went on, as difficult as it was with the discipline of the suffering and the pain of, the low carbs and no fat and all that and everything else, the better you looked, the more you could endure because you had results.
Yes.
And that's another thing I just want to imply to everybody, is that you have to stick with something long enough to develop some results, or else you're going to quit. And I didn't know when that was, as I said at the beginning, all unknown to me, and I had
Yes.
no idea that that moment was going to happen where I was looking in the mirror like that. So, anyways, as I get closer to the end, I'm doing posing clinics. I'm learning all the posing, and I'm around a lot of other bodybuilders, and I'm learning all kinds of stuff from everybody. And I had a few people, come to me. I was one of the older guys, of course. I'm in my mid 50s when I did this. It was so crazy in and of itself. But I had several people, experienced bodybuilders, come to me and say, "Hey, man, you can do pretty good. You look great." And again, that was highly motivating. So when I was about 2 weeks out from the show, I had a posing clinic with David, and was working on my routine. And he said, "Jerry, you actually came along better than I thought." And that was like the first positive thing I heard from this guy. And it was like exactly what the doctor ordered, because 2 weeks out from any show, if you ask any bodybuilder that's really doing their diet and really doing all the cardio and everything, you're in serious pain. I mean, doing workouts on no carbs and low fats and so forth, it was just an unbearable situation. So he said to me, he goes, "Jerry, look, you're in the classic division, and there's three divisions in bodybuilding. The classic's the middle division, where the judging is more on symmetry that than overall size, right? Because I get, like I said at the beginning, I'm not a genetically big guy. So he said the only advantage you're going to get is you got to outcondition the competitors." And he goes, "I can't tell you, how you're going to place. It depends who shows up, depends on the judges. There's so many variables to this stuff." And at the beginning, my goal was just to be able to get on the stage. I mean, 90% don't make it. So I took what he said about the conditioning thing, thought about it for a day or two, and I said to myself, "You know what? I got 2 weeks. I got to battle this thing." And I was doing um, 2 a day cardio sessions, 45 minutes each. And each one of those was, in the 6 to 800 calorie burn session. So that's a pretty good pace for 45 minutes. And I got my body fat down to less than 6%. a week out from the show. And multiple people said, you know, "Jerry, you got a chance," and this is like my first show. I was like, so to me, I didn't think about that, but I was on the step mill. This is like 4 days before the show, and all of a sudden, a thought came to mind that really hit hard. It was, what if I finished second? And the reason that was so impactful for me was because in my golf career, from the time after I left junior golf, from the time I was 18, I never won a golf tournament. Finished second 4 or 5 times, had lots of top tens, but I never won a golf tournament. And it's no different. I mean, I know we're not talking about professional level golf, but I was at a pretty high level. It's no different than someone like Dan Marino, one great quarterback from the Miami Dolphins years ago, never won a Super Bowl. If you don't win that championship, it's always kind of in the back of your mind that you didn't do enough. And that thought propelled me to, I can't finish second. This can't happen again, right? And so 3 days out from the show, what happens is you back off your cardio, you back off your workouts a little bit, you consume a little more carbs. The day before the show, you don't have any water, you kind of thin out your skin, and again, because I was new to this, I didn't know what to expect. So it's show day, right, on a Saturday, and I have an appointment in the basement where they do the tanning at like 6 a.m. to get my spray tan done and everything. And and again, this is just like the second I got there, I realized, and this is a dark place, man. These are some tough people. It's kind of a strange world, the inner workings of the bodybuilding world. And the reality is if you think about it, a lot of narcissistic type mentalities, and everybody's, that's what it takes to be really good at something like that. So anyways, I go in the basement, and and it's mostly, you got to get naked to do your spray tan, and it's all women doing the spray tanning, right? So it was just very awkward. And the women competitors, some of them were down there walking around topless. It was like the weirdest, craziest thing. So get my tan done, and I go back to my room at the hotel, and go upstairs, and I had exactly what to eat before the show to make sure you look exactly right, which I believe was a English muffin with some peanut butter and some egg whites. And you got to go, the way these bodybuilding shows work is, it doesn't matter what time you go on stage. If you're in this show, you have to be backstage for the entire time. So at 9 o'clock, I go over to the arena. I go down there, and I'm in backstage in behind the basement, where you walk out. It's a big arena, and I'm just looking around, and and seeing like who's my competitors, and anything that you would normally do. Well, I didn't really know who's in my group or not in my group. You could just I was in something by my height. So when we go to line up to go out there, um, they put you in a line. And that was the first time I got to see who I was up against. Okay. First of all, nobody was even close to my age. This is, most people that are over 50 compete in what they call the masters group or the grandmasters group. And I did that too as well. You can compete in more than one group, but this was in the open group, which is everybody. And the reality of it is, at my age, first show, you really don't have a chance. But when we got in line to go out there, I saw everybody, and there were guys bigger than me, but nobody looked as conditioned as I looked,
Ooh.
as far as being shredded, like the muscle definition. And I remember what David told me, that in the classic division, that's a big factor. So when we line up to go out there, when we go on the stage, it turns out that I was in the center of the line, and the way the judging works is they move people around to where the person who ends up in the center is generally the winner. Okay, and I say generally the winner because at the night show they do that's when you come out and do your routines, and it's more for the crowd and everything. But the judges can make last minute changes if they want to, but it's kind of rare. But I when we were lined up, I started in the center and I was never moved from the center. And so when I walked off that stage, I'm thinking, okay, 90% chance I just won. Is that for real? Right. And so the bottom line was won the Maryland State Bodybuilding Championship, um, buried all those old demons, from years ago about finishing second. And, the endurance and the effort that took, and I was 57 years old when this happened, changed me forever. On the other side of pain and suffering lies a different human being, and I was never the same after that. It was just a complete, um, almost like a rebirth of who I was, moving
Wow.
forward. Yeah.
Wow. Well, walking away as the Maryland State champion, Jerry, come on. That's just amazing, buddy.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you.
Right.
Congratulations to you. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in our notes and outline.
Yep.
I want to remind our listeners that sometimes these goals can take a long time. I mean, your bodybuilding story, it took decades actually. I mean, you've been
Yeah.
lifting those weights. You're trying to get to the 300 pounds. I mean, what a long story to get you where it was. But what did that long pursuit teach you?
Several things. I mean, first thing is, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the story, is that you have to seek advice from those in the know. My bodybuilding coach, this guy was what I describe in my book, an alpha lion. He was completely obsessed with his clients, obsessed with his profession. He understand the biology of the human body. He understand the psychology of what bodybuilders go through. So you got to seek advice from those in the know. Only ask and work with elite professional allies. That's first thing. Second thing is, and this is another one that people, you, boy, I can't emphasize this enough. A missed goal is not a missed opportunity. You can come back again, again, and again. So just because it didn't go down the path that you thought it was going to go, or something else got in the way, or there was an injury, or there was something in your personal life got in the way, it's still something you can come back to at another time, which I did multiple times. Um, Third one, this is when you're in the presence of an alpha lion. An alpha lion is an innovator, someone who is so elite at what they do, the one of a kind people. Shut up and listen. We all want to question everything. And by the way, I tried that with David a couple times, and he got livid with me. I mean, I learned just not to ask stuff because, you know, I'm asking him amateurish questions to somebody who's so elite and so elevated in their profession of what they do. It was almost like embarrassing to him that I'd ask a question like that, right? So you have to have the ability to step back and listen. And then the other one we just talked about, what lies have you been telling yourself and for how long? Huge one. I mean, that whole thing with the cardio, I literally was lying to myself for 30 years that I couldn't do cardio when I just hadn't had the right coaching, hadn't worked hard enough, and I became a decent cardio guy. Not that I go out and run a marathon, but I mean, I could do it, right? So, that
Yeah,
was something that was that. And last thing is, and this is just, I can't emphasize this enough. Discipline is the strongest form of self-love.
love it. Love it. That's so
If
big.
if you want to feel good about yourself, get engaged with regimented disciplines on a daily basis.
And discipline has such a negative connotation to so many people. We need to figure a way to change that. We
Yeah.
need, I mean, your lesson that you just shared about it being the highest form of self-love is so true. We need to get people to love that. I guess that's what embrace the battle is all about.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it goes back to, a word I use a lot, counterintuitive. It's like, why would you ever think doing something so difficult and so hard is good for you, right? So you got to remember that.
Yeah.
And by the way, Russell, I get asked all the time, why would anybody put themselves through such pain and suffering? And the answer is this simple: our struggles determine our strengths, and our strengths lift us to glory. And if you embrace that, you're headed to good things.
Wow.
By self-inflicting, hell upon yourself, you will be prepared, okay, for when it's thrust upon you when it wasn't something that you intended. Okay. And I can promise you this, for every one of us, that day is coming.
Wow. Well, Jerry, I want to add something here. So many people, let me see how to say this. So many people think embrace the battle is all about resilience. And, the famous Winston Churchill quote of never quit, never quit, never quit, never quit. Boy, and by the way, that's a great quote.
Yep.
But, my favorite part of embrace the battle is it's changed my approach and the way I look at my battle going in. I now lean into the battle. It's not just about never quitting, it's about leaning in with excitement and anticipate, bring it on. I mean, that's how I'm looking at my battles now.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that comes from you have to take a quantum leap into the unknown the first couple times, and again, that's hard to do. Fear, risk, all those things. The first couple times discipline has to drive you to get to where you start getting results, and I think we talked about that earlier. You got to stick with something long enough to get results, because once you start seeing the pattern that your efforts put out and the discipline and the return that comes your way, then you get to exactly what you just said. You wake up and you're looking forward to a challenge.
Yeah.
The I guess another way is to put this is your life's elevation are going to be in direct proportion to the amount of reliability and responsibility you can take on. So you know every time you achieve something and you become a better human being or a go-to person, someone that people can count on, you're increasing your level of accountability to everything else in your life. And that people who are what I call go-to people have what are called we've all heard of the law of attraction. People are like you're a great example of this. You're somebody that within 20, 30 minutes of meeting you, talking to you, and learning anything at all about you, you attract, right, people to you. And once you're in that position where you're in the attraction mode, your entire life becomes a lot easier and enjoyable.
Wow. Well, thank you for that compliment.
Yep.
I tell you what, I've got, first I want to show you something. I want to show our listeners something.
Yep.
This is, Jerry, I think you're going to have to make up a bunch of these.
There you go. All right. Yeah, we got a few of those.
Okay, well, I mean, I know our intention is not to make our big money off of merch, but you know what? As Mel Robbins, one of the big podcasters right now, her big line is "Let them." So I'm going to say, hey, if our listeners want to buy a T-shirt, let them.
Right. There you go.
Well, listen, there's one more thing I want to cover quickly
Sure.
before we close this one out. And, people might be saying, wow, well, that's a heck of a story. And yeah, I like this embrace the battle. I think that sounds pretty cool. I like that. But, for some people, the problem getting started is fear. I mean, you've mentioned it a minute ago, fear. And I want to read something that I just saw from Brian Knight. Saw this the other day. I loved it. Becoming the best version of yourself does not mean taking on these challenges once you feel ready. That's not how it works. You take them on before you feel ready. Becoming the best version of you is an act of courage. It always includes facing the things you feel unprepared to face. It means stepping forward into doubt, criticism, or an unpopular decision. It means letting go of a good thing before you've earned the great thing, but trusting that you will earn it. It is inherently an uncertain path. That's fear. So grab hold of your courage, dig into your discipline, and take on the challenges that form your identity and define your life. Again, Brian Knight. Fear. We gotta face our fear and get started. We gotta just pull up those boots and get going with this stuff, Jerry.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could give you, some magic success formula, but the reality of it is there's nothing about success that's easy. In fact, it's hard. I mean, really hard. It takes just a relentless pursuit. Nothing happens by accident. My advice, for people is you got to understand what you're up against before you start. You have to, like when I went into the bodybuilding thing, of course there's unknowns, okay? But I knew just looking at what other people were doing and these people in the gym and the workouts and talking to people, I knew it was really hard. Right? So, my one thing I would tell people is when you set out on an endeavor to do something that's going to take a big commitment. It's not something that's a 1 day thing, something that's several months or a year long or something. Plan on it being 10 times harder than you anticipate. You have to plant the seeds of the commitment, plant the seeds of discipline. That's what's going to keep you from quitting with the first difficulty or adversity. And if your history is, by the way, and this is true for a lot of people, that you do quit. If you're one of those people that every year you make the New Year's resolution and every year January 2nd it's over, okay, that's okay. Just recognize that and know that, okay, this time it's going to be different. And here's why it's going to be different. And you have to have a plan as to how you're going to battle through that, through regimented disciplines. If you have regimented disciplines where you know, kind of I call it making a contract with yourself. You know, it, it's amazing to me how people will make a commitment to somebody else, and they'll keep that commitment to somebody else like their life depended on it. But when it comes to yourself, we always give in and we quit and we give up. It should be the opposite. Commit to yourself first. That way you can be better to help other people. So, again, it's just a mindset that has to be developed. It's not something that happens overnight. And if you have a setback, one of my favorite lines is the comeback always exceeds the setback. Just the key is the resilience not to quit.
And I meant to have a graphic for that, but I don't have it. But
Right.
here's one I do have because this is really important. I'm going to read it and I'm going to pull it up for people if you're watching. Once you learn to love the battle, you will learn to love the results. That is Jerry Freishtat right there. And I mean, that is embrace the battle. I don't know that there's any better words anywhere than that, Jerry.
Yeah, that's the entire thing. In order to learn to love the battle, you have to fight the battle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're wired for that comfort thing. And as long as you want to just sit in that comfort zone and kind of hide in your turtle shell and where the world and everything's kumbaya, nothing great's happening there. And so again, it doesn't matter whether it's I like physical things. Like if you're just getting started, I like a challenge, a physical challenge, because the reason is it's the easiest to measure. It doesn't take, a whole lot of education. Anybody can go out and do it. And again, if you're somebody listening and you're someone that's never been to the gym, and I don't care if you're 50 pounds overweight, whatever it is, you got to start somewhere, right? Let's get down that walk to the end of the street and back on that first week, right? But the thing is, it's happening at 6 a.m., not 6:01. Okay. I'm making it to the end of the street. I don't care if I have to stop and rest. I'm going to finish. And when I come back, I'm going to feel damn good about it. And the next day, I'm going to do it again. That's
Jerry,
how it works.
Jerry, I actually read something just the other day about New Year's resolutions that I think is real important, because I believe this, of course, applies to any time someone does a reset or a restart, but it's particularly written about New Year's resolutions. Everybody knows that the great majority of people who are gung ho about their New Year's resolutions, so many of them fall off the path, whether it's the first week or the first month, their history. But here's the number: 20% of the people stick with it. 20% of the people with New Year's resolutions stick with it. Hey, I think we should be celebrating those 20%, and let's get in that group. Let's get in that group that makes a commitment and is able to stay in it. Jerry, I'm going to ask you to close us out. I'm going to tell you what I want. Let's give our listeners 3 things they can do this week to embrace the battle and get going with this new life.
Yeah. I mean, again, Russell, we're all about results here, right? So, our goal is to get people moving in the right direction. So here's the first thing I'd recommend you do. Write a contract with yourself. I don't care what it is. As I said, it could be as small as what I just said, walking down to the block in the street and back. Commit that contract to 7 days. That's it. I want you to do that. That's step 1. Number 2, put something that you're going to do that's very difficult and hard on your calendar so you can't miss it. Okay. I want you to look at it every single day. That's number 2. Number 3, you got to track your micro wins daily. When I say micro wins, I'm talking about the smallest little things: hanging that picture, flossing, don't hit the snooze button. Okay. Track these little wins, okay, that you do on a daily basis. Those little reps build unshakable strength. And remember, you don't need congratulations from anyone else except yourself. Okay. Most of us are totally driven by outside external circumstances and recognition and people needing to tell us, put their arm around you. Oh, great job. And all that. You need to congratulate yourself when you do something well. So do that. Okay. And remember, it's okay to compliment yourself, say to yourself, I did it. Okay. So do that on those micro wins on a daily basis, and they add up. I have something else called the principle of accumulation, where you have enough of these little wins and it starts to reprogram your subconscious mind. And all of a sudden you start becoming that person. And so just track it every single day. At the end of the day, write down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 things, micro wins. And they could be the smallest little things that you caught yourself, oh, I don't feel like doing it, but you did it. Okay. I mean, it could be as simple as filling up the ice cube tray. I normally wouldn't do that, but I did it this time. That's a win.
Get that momentum going.
Exactly.
Get that momentum. I love it.
Yep.
So, I want to share with our listeners that we are trying to get your bodybuilding coach, David, onto a segment with us.
Yep.
Is that correct? Have you spoken to him?
I've emailed him and I haven't heard back yet, but I'm sure that he will do that as soon as I reach him.
Well, we're gonna try and get him into maybe even the next segment. We'll see, but I know that'll be amazing to hear some of the stories that he's got and talk to us about discipline. So, Jerry, here it is. I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence. When you learn to love the battle,
you learn to love the results.
I love it. That's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for paying attention today. Thank you for joining us. Jerry, an amazing story. It's just a fantastic story. And I'd love to know what that diet is one day. We're going to have to talk about that. But if I remember correctly, I think I took you to lunch one day during that. And boy, that was pretty pitiful. All right. Well, listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We love having you. We look forward to your comments, your feedback. We're going on a every 2 week schedule. So it took us a while to make that decision, but we're going on every 2 weeks. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again for joining us. And Jerry, thank you, my man. Talk to you real soon.
Yep. Thanks.